Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first of our Life Talks here at Cross of Life. My name is Caleb. I'm the pastor at our congregation, and we're thankful that you took the time to join us this evening. Life Talks are our attempt to make some space for people to question and discuss important issues of the day. One of the things that we're finding out is that really there are two obstacles to the average Western person dealing with the big issues of the day. On the one hand, there are those who, they're afraid. Maybe they tried to have a conversation about a big topic, a social issue, a political disagreement, and they got shouted down. Or maybe they lost a relationship. Maybe they were left with a bad taste in their mouth. And so many people are just afraid to have these important conversations. On the other hand, there are those I think who just don't have the time. With everything that our schedules fill up with, running from the next thing to the next thing and trying to find some time to relax in there, many of us just don't take the time to deal with the big questions of life. And so Life Talks is our attempt to make that space. First of all, a space where you can question and you can discuss and you can share your opinion and you can know that the people who are gathered here because they care about you. And they're here not to convince you that their way is necessarily right, but to have a meaningful conversation and to seek to understand you so we can find some common ground. And it's taking some time out of a night of your week to think about the big things of life. I know many of you are joining us online, but if you were to join us in person for a Life Talk, our goal is that we would serve you a meal, that we would do everything for you for an evening so that you can just sit back and actually take the time to question the big questions. Now, like I said, many of you are joining us online. There are a few of us who are here in the building tonight, which I appreciate. But our hope is that in January and subsequently every quarter or every 3 months or so, moving on from there, we're going to have one of these Life Talk events. We would love to have you join us, eat a meal with us, join us to hear a message of an important topic, and to have some chances to just discuss the issues of the day. So if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to fill out our Connect form that I'm going to show you a little bit later in the service so that your email address can be added to a list that allows you to stay connected with us and hear about upcoming Life Talks and topics. The next topic that's coming up in January is going to be the topic of freedom. We're going to talk about what is freedom, what are freedom's limits, when does my freedom start to infringe on someone else's freedom, and then we're going to look at a biblically unique answer to that tension that we find in our culture. So tonight's topic is judgment. And if you're joining us, I'd love for you to take out your notes sheet at this time. Those of you who are in the building, grabbed a notes sheet on the way in, but if you're following with us online, the notes sheets are in a Dropbox folder that is linked in the description of the video, both on our YouTube and on our online worship portal. You can find that link. I would encourage you to go to that folder and download the notes sheet. The value of the notes sheet is it just gives you a space to jot down a few thoughts as I'm going through the talk. I hope to go only about 15 minutes or so. You can write down things that are interesting, challenging, maybe questions that you have or things that you disagree with, so that when we get to the discussion time, you can bring those things up with maybe a person who you're watching with or in our chat box. Also, speaking of the chat box, if you're watching with us on YouTube, in order to participate in the chat, you're going to have to subscribe to our channel. It is totally us just trying to get more subscribers to our channel. Don't worry, it's on purpose. We are definitely bait and switching you. But that is because we believe there's some really good content that we're putting out on our YouTube channel that we want you to be in touch with moving forward. So please hit subscribe on our YouTube channel so you can participate in the chat and see other things that are coming up in the future. Like I said, today's topic is the topic of judgment. And I want to look at 4 things when it comes to judgment. First of all, I want to look at the need for judgment. and the problem of judgment, the solution for judgment, and then the practical implications of that solution. So, the first of those, the need for judgment. As modern, sophisticated Western people, we have something of a duplicitous relationship with judgment. It's almost a cultural trope, a refrain, if you will. Don't judge me. You can't judge me. I just read an article recently that said the most known Bible verse by people who don't identify as Christians is where Jesus says in the Gospel of Matthew, "Judge not, or you will be judged." You can go to a gym that promises judgment-free zones. Schools try to tout themselves as places where there is no judgment. Many of us would even try to sort of build ourselves up by saying, "I'm not a very judgmental person." It seems that we really don't like judgment. But I think every one of us has a deep sense that there needs to be judgment. I mean, none of us is okay when another woman posts on Twitter #MeToo. None of us is okay when a more privileged or powerful group of people oppress or even take advantage of a lesser privileged or lesser powerful group of people. None of us feels okay when we're lied to by a politician or betrayed by a close friend or cheated out of opportunities or resources. We have this sense that there should be some judgment, there should be some retribution for all of these bad things that happen. So which is it? Do we want judgment-free zones, the ability to say, "Don't judge me," or do we want judgment? So we have this tension in our culture where we claim not to like judgment, but at the same time live as though there is. But let me press you on this just a little bit. Because I think the people who say, "Don't judge me," are actually the people who are craving judgment the most. See, if a person really believed that they didn't want anyone to judge them, they would have to answer with the same vigor, "Don't judge me, you can't judge me," to the person who complimented them as to the person who insulted them. Can you imagine it? You go into your boss's office and your boss says to you, "You know what, you've really been exceeding expectations the last couple months." You're like, "Don't judge me." Or maybe you're out on a date with that special someone, and they say, "You know what, your outfit is just awesome tonight. You can't judge me." Like, none of us would say that. Because truthfully, what we want is judgment. We just don't want judgment that finds us wanting. We want judgment that approves of us. And so I would press you, if you're someone who thinks that you don't want anyone to judge you, actually, I think you're the person who wants judgment the most. Because almost inevitably, if you're a person who says, "Don't judge me," you are almost frantically searching for a community of people to affirm you in whatever you say or whatever you do or whatever you think. See, our problem is not with judgment. Our problem is that judgment exposes what's wrong with me. See, every one of us needs judgment. Without judgment, we would have a society where everybody did whatever they wanted, to whom or with whom whoever they wanted, and we would fall apart. I mean, it takes only a sane person to think that through and figure that out. And maybe to push it a step further, if there's no judgment, then nothing really matters at all. Like, if there's no judgment, if there's no transcendent value of good or evil, then you could do a whole bunch of good or a whole bunch of evil, and none of it would matter in the end, because somewhere down the line, maybe 1 billion years from now, the earth is going to run out of energy and we're all going to die, or some cataclysmic event is going to kill all of humanity, and it will not have mattered whether you were good or you were evil, because it will all be over. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced you that there's a need for judgment. But that leads us to the problem. The truth is, we definitely need judgment. We need the ability to see another person and evaluate them and say, are they right or are they wrong? The problem comes that the necessary attendant circumstance of that judgment is always either some sort of looking down on another person, or maybe taken to its logical conclusion, some sort of exclusion, oppression, bigotry, even hatred or coercion. Let me show you how this works. If you are judging someone, you're judging them based on a set of values that you adhere to. If you're a religious person, maybe you get those values from the Ten Commandments, or from the Five Pillars, or from the Torah. And whatever that system is that you hold on to, you judge other people based on that. You adhere to that system because you believe that that is the most beneficial way for people to live in the world. And so necessarily, if someone doesn't live by that standard that you adhere to, you must come to the logical conclusion that they are a worse person for society. It's necessary. If there is judgment, there will be people looking down on other people. And I don't think I need to give you examples of how bad this can get. It often isn't just looking down on someone, it's speaking badly about them, gossiping about them, maybe even separating them from a group or hurting them in some way. See, judgment always leads to some sort of schism in society. And while I think it's most often found in religious communities, you don't have to be a religious person to see this. Even if you're not a religious person, you have a set of values that you live by, a set of things that you say, good people do this. Good people act this way. Good people say this. Good people treat their neighbor this way. Good people are acting this way in society. Whatever those things are, you've decided for yourself those are the things, and you necessarily look down on anyone who doesn't live that way. And so we're stuck. Stuck in a place of knowing that, well, if there's no judgment, then nothing matters and everything will become a mess. But if there is judgment, then necessarily society will start to schism into smaller and smaller groups of judgmental individuals and others looking down on each other or oppressing each other or hating each other or coercing each other. There's a problem, isn't there? Which brings us to the solution. There's this place in John chapter 12. John is one of the books of the Bible, one of the biographies of Jesus of Nazareth. In John chapter 12, Jesus says this amazing statement. He says, "Now is the time for the judgment on this world." Now, what I think is interesting about this statement is what happens next. Like if you're a typical person, you hear, "Now is the time for judgment," and what you probably envision is like some divine courtroom scene where God is going to sit on the judge's bench, and each plaintiff is going to be put in front of him, and he's going to judge each of them and say either you were good or you were bad, and you're going to end up in heaven or in hell. And I think that's what most of us would think, but that's not Christianity. See, the very next thing that happens after this statement is Jesus dies on a cross. Effectively saying, the judgment of the world happens in me. Every other worldview, every other world religion lives by this paradigm that there is a set of absolute truths, and the people who adhere to them, the good, they make it, they're saved, they find heaven or nirvana or whatever. And the bad, those who don't adhere, those who are unfaithful, they end up separated or in hell or dead or whatever the negative outcome is for them. But not Christianity, because Christianity says, although there is a set of absolute moral values, every person has fallen short of those moral values, and yet they have already been judged in Jesus. Just think that through for a second. Very often we think the judgment is something that is coming, and that my good works or my bad works, they're being tallied, they're being counted, and that at the end they're going to be revealed as the marker of whether I was a good person or a bad person. But what the Bible actually says is, no, that judgment has already happened. See, back on the cross 2,000 years ago, Jesus took the judgment of the world. And the result of that judgment for every single person is that they no longer are liable for punishment. Now, there are some practical implications to this, which I really want you to work out in your mind, because I think it is the solution that actually makes the problem of judgment go away. The first of those is that if it is true that the judgment of the world came down on Jesus on the cross, then therefore there is no grounds for any superiority between any other person ever. Because the only thing that was strong enough, powerful enough to pay for my sin was the death of the Son of God on a cross. Now, I've done some bad things in my life. But as far as North American standards go, I'm a relatively obedient citizen. And yet Jesus still had to die on a cross for me. It's not like God put Jesus on the cross for some people and then put Jesus into community service for other people. Now, everyone's sins, from the least to the greatest, they were all liable for death on a cross. And so that maybe I'm not a sexual predator or a serial killer or a money launderer who steals billions from people, but I can feel no superiority to those people who act that way. Because my sin, my evil, was worthy of the same punishment. Now you might say, okay, but if that's the case, then you're saying that if the judgment has already passed, then anybody can just do whatever they want for the rest of time because they're already judged okay in Jesus. And the answer to that is, yeah. Now, there's something you have to add to that. Of course, if we went on and did evil things, would that judgment still stand for us? Absolutely. But the thing is, many people don't know that that's the case. And they don't understand what it really means. See, if my evil, my wickedness was so bad that Jesus had to die on a cross, why would I ever go back to it? If it's that bad, if it's that harmful to other people and to myself, why would I ever go back to it, knowing that I've been freed from it? Another objection might be, okay, but you're now saying that people who do just terrible atrocities, the worst of the worst, the things that make our skin crawl and our stomachs turn, those people, they can be saved? And again, the answer is yes. Because the death of the Son of God is sufficient to pay for every one of them. And so we eliminate the problem of superiority, don't we? But we also solve the problem of purposeless existence. It might be a logical conclusion to say, okay, if Jesus has taken the judgment away, then now we're going to live in that arena that we described where there's no judgment. Then no one will be able to look down on anyone for anything ever. But that's not really the case either. Because if Jesus did that, and there are people who don't know about it, then your life has the purpose of helping them know about that. So that they can no longer live trying to justify their own existence, trying to live up to some standard or find some affirmation in this world from, frankly, people who don't actually care about them enough to even give them $5, much less give them their life. And so, we lose the problem of superiority and we lose the problem of purposelessness because the judgment has already happened and it looks forward to the final revealing of that judgment. But there's one more practical implication that I want to give you. And it's for your personal life. Because those people who cry out, "Don't judge me," whether you say it out loud or whether you just think it internally, there's a part of you that realizes that you're trapped. You're trapped in this body, this world, and you can't seem to live good enough for people to accept you. And whether you call that sin, or whether you call that karma, or whether you call that just not living up to your expectations, it can crush you. But the last practical application of this idea that Jesus has taken the judgment for us is, I think, perfectly summed up in one of the letters of the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul was a great church planter in the first century in what we now know as the Mediterranean world, in Turkey particularly. He wrote this. He said, "I care very little if I am judged by you or by any human court. Indeed, I do not even judge myself. My conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. It is the Lord who judges me." In other words, he says, I know that I'm messed up. And that haunts me. And I know that other people know that I'm messed up. And that haunts me. Because the truth is, I am. But I don't care what they think. I don't even care what I think. Because the Lord has said, I judge you innocent. Because I pronounced your judgment on Jesus 2,000 years ago. And that, my friends, will give you two things that when they are held in tension are absolutely beautiful. Humility and confidence. Humility, because you realize that you don't deserve any of this. That you've been less than perfect, that you've hurt other people, that you deserve some form of judgment. And yet confident. Because you know that the judgment has already been taken out in the past on Jesus. Therefore, there is no more judgment left for you. A person with only humility is a pushover. A person with only confidence is a bully. But a person who can balance those two things can move forward in society being a force for good. That only comes from understanding what Jesus has done and what that means for you.